Bradley Beal still potentially leaving the Phoenix Suns, but this time it's Zach LaVine coming back. How does Jimmy Butler feel about that one? We're going to dive into the latest. I'm Trevor Lade. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. Joined by Donnie Freeman. Donnie, as the NBA trade machine turns here, now we've got rumors that Zach LaVine could be the one headed to Phoenix. What is going on?
It's just crazy. I don't know if we should believe this or if it's spin or what it is, but it's just insane the amount of different ways this could all ultimately go. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing whatever the heck happens here in this whole Jimmy Butler-esque saga.
So this is from Jake Fisher on Mark Stein and his fantastic Substack. Saying in Zach LaVine's case, he's had a fantastic season for the Chicago Bulls, no question. Still has a very big contract, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But in Zach LaVine's case, he's not pushing to be moved, yet that won't necessarily insulate LaVine from being dealt if an offer Chicago-like surfaces in the next 13 days. Yeah, no question, right? We know the Chicago Bulls would prefer to move Zach LaVine. They've been trying to move him for a while now, and they found it difficult to do so because of his contract. But then, get this, sources say Phoenix, to name one example, can emerge with interest in exploring a swap of Bradley Beal for LaVine, sources said, depending on how the rest of the trade landscape develops in the coming weeks. I mean, we've been hearing Jimmy Butler to Phoenix. The Suns made that big move to get 3 first-round picks so that they could have more flexibility on the market. And now suddenly it's like they're developing another option. Well, number one, I think Phoenix really, really wants to move Bradley Beal, and we'll see if he'll waive that no-trade clause. But now they're developing some other options that aren't Jimmy Butler. That's interesting. It makes me wonder about what that means for the Jimmy Butler situation.
Yeah. So also, I am like half sleep. I noticed I said Jimmy Butler-esque, but this is like adjacent. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm going to say some crazy stuff. Sometimes I say some crazy stuff anyway. But yeah, so one thing I'm noticing is that it seems like they really are like out on Beal. They want him gone at any cost. Like they're trying their hardest to get rid of Beal for what it's worth. LaVine would be an interesting player to plug in there, but it's just so crazy because we had been hearing so much about Jimmy Butler. Like these two sides were both locked in on a trade happening to where Jimmy was going to make his way over to Phoenix, but LaVine is kind of swooping in out of nowhere. And that's good because Chicago needs to try to get off of him. And I don't know that you could have asked LaVine to play any better this year than he has. And I think he's proven and shown, obviously it's not a winning team or anything like that, but when you look at the numbers, he's one of the main reasons they have won the games that they've won this year. And he's shown that he can be a good NBA player. He's shown that he can get out there for a prolonged period and stay healthy for the most part this year, playing 40 games up to now. LaVine's been awesome this year. So I think he'd be somebody that they could plug into that team. And I mean, who do you think is a better player between the two? I think that's a fair question. Yeah. I think LaVine as well, but I think that's a fair question. Some may ask, but I think LaVine, in my opinion, pretty clear cut. And he would probably fit what they're trying to do in Phoenix as well, a little bit better.
Yeah, I like Zach LaVine better than Bradley Beal this season. And on top of that, Zach LaVine doesn't have a no-trade clause, which begs the question, would Beal waive the no-trade clause to go to Chicago? Probably not. He'd probably have to find another team, probably have to be a third team in the deal. So that's kind of a messy situation as well. But yeah, if I'm the Phoenix Suns, I would rather have Zach LaVine. I think you're still perpetuating the problem, though, of you've got 3 big salaried players in LaVine, Durant, and Devin Booker, who all their best attribute is putting the ball in the basket. And I think that to me doesn't work. Now, Jimmy gives you a little bit more of the grit. He could be a bit more of a playmaker, and LaVine can do it too. He's averaging 4.5 assists, not the defensive player that Jimmy Butler can be, but he can play make a little bit, certainly more than Bradley Beal can, at least in my opinion. I like Zach LaVine a little bit better there, but I do think you're still perpetuating that same problem. But if I'm Phoenix and I could turn Bradley Beal into Zach LaVine, I would definitely do that. Now, take a look at this. This is from Brian Windhorst. Said sources on both sides of the Butler saga say there's motivation to get a deal done between now and the deadline. The Heat have had conversations with other teams, but so far the offers coming in haven't included what Miami is looking for. players who can help now, young talent, draft capital, and salary that expires by the summer of 2026. So that's interesting, 2026. So Miami's saying, hey, we'll take back salary. Doesn't necessarily have to be expiring this year. It can expire next summer, and we'll be okay with that as well. They want to be a big player in free agency in 2026. But right now, the offers don't include what Miami is looking for. So if right now there's not a Jimmy Butler deal because Miami doesn't have the offers they want, the Phoenix Suns, they're doing their due diligence and trying to see, hey, if this doesn't work out, if we can't get Miami the stuff they want for Jimmy, we need to have another path to go down here.
That's why, like, there's been so much talk about, a 4 or 5 team trade. I think Sidery posted a framework of one earlier this morning, which is interesting as well, with a lot of different moving pieces, including, I think, the other two guys we're talking about in today's video. But the Jimmy Butler thing is kind of crazy because, a lot of people kind of feel like it's either you trade him or you lose him. They still have the option of taking this into the summer if they want to and signing and trading him elsewhere because nobody really has cap space. So they're in a weird spot with this. I don't know that they have to move him, but I do think they should because their players want him gone. It's a distraction in the locker room and on the court, I imagine, all that stuff. You just kind of got to get the problem out of there if possible. And we're kind of approaching the deadline here in a couple of weeks. There's not a lot of time left. So they're going to have to make a decision. But I think it's interesting that they want young players, salary and or draft capital. Like they're in a weird spot. It feels like they're asking for a trade for Jimmy, like he's, like 31 or something. Like they're trying to get like the superstar trade. Like, he's going to be expecting a max extension in the latter half of his 30s. And he's still going to be, pretty good for a long period of time. But for the regular season, just flat out, I don't think he's particularly worth 50 million because the value that you don't get from him on the court sometimes while he's out there in terms of statistically, and the fact he's going to miss about 20, 25 games a year.
Absolutely.
So
and that's the issue is you've got to find a team that's willing to give Jimmy his next contract. The Phoenix Suns reportedly being a team that are willing to do so. Who else could be out there? It really does seem like it's Phoenix or bust right now to me for Jimmy, unless suddenly the Warriors change their mind and they decide to get back into the mix or something like that. Again, though, when I'm looking at these salaries, Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, they're all kind of in that similar range. LaVine is actually the cheapest one of the three between Beal, Butler, and LaVine. And I think between it's weird to suddenly be looking at Zach LaVine as a cheap option, right? We've been hearing all we've been talking about is how expensive Zach LaVine's contract is, and it is. But I think I can make a real argument that at 29, if I had to pick between those three players, LaVine, Butler, Beal, Bradley Beal's no trade clause makes him an immediate no thank you. And then between Zach LaVine and Jimmy Butler, you've got Zach LaVine, who's played the good soldier role, who's played for Chicago, given them everything that he could, caused no problems, knowing all of the trade situation and everything like that. Give me Zach LaVine. If I had to rank them, I would put Zach LaVine as the top guy. So even if I'm Miami and I have to try to, now Chicago's not going to take back Jimmy Butler, but if I could get in on this where I could get back Zach LaVine in a Jimmy Butler swap, maybe I just do that if I'm Miami. I know he doesn't fit great with Tyler Hero, but man, I didn't think, Donnie, 6 months ago, if you told me this is where we would be, that Zach LaVine would be number one out of LaVine, Butler, and Beal, I wouldn't have guessed it.
Yeah, I think the ceiling is lower in the playoffs versus Butler, but that could just be me putting a lot of credit on what he's done over the last handful of years here and the reputation he's built as a playoff performer. And I think LaVine's got a little bit of a longer deal, but I do see the upside there for sure. And you said that they wouldn't be in Chicago on Butler. They should be trying to get him back. Who cares where he wants to go? Because he's going to be a expiring deal that you can get off the books. He probably won't play. So that's a win-win if you can get him and then get rid of LaVine's contract and he's upset he doesn't play. If you're Chicago, that's a win-win. But for Jimmy's sake, I do hope he goes to a team that can compete. And again, that would be Phoenix. That's all we've heard up until now. But maybe there's another player on the market somehow that he's able to get somewhere else. Like, is it possible for him to go to, it would have to be a multi-team deal again, but maybe, Milwaukee, they're kind of not really so much a part of this. And they had been talked about previously as a part of this deal. So if these other teams are going to find something else to do and kind of not make it the big expansive deal, is there a way for Milwaukee to get Jimmy Butler? Because I thought that if they were a part of the Jimmy trade, they should try to get him in the first place. Because I think he fits great.
No, I agree. I agree with that. And remember, Milwaukee would have to move Pat Connaughton first to aggregate salaries as a second-tier apron team,
Yep.
but that would make sense. So, I mean, this bottom line, Donnie, what this all sets up is for what should be a very, very fun run-up to the NBA's trade deadline. Now, 13 days away, coming up on February 6th. Everybody, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications as well, and go check out Donnie's video from yesterday about Anthony Davis wanting the Lakers to pick up another big.